Good day and welcome to another lesson with me. Today we'll be looking at the 2018 prelim booklet A. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So before you attempt any questions, it's always good to identify the topic that this question is from and as well as the concept from the topic that you've identified. So in the very first question, John classified three organisms using the flowchart below. So this question is actually a question from diversity on classification. All right, so for this question, you know that you have how do you classify things according to mammals, insects, birds, etc., reptiles. So in order to do that, you have to go and memorize the various characteristics of the different groups of animals. So whether is it a mammal, or is it an insect, or is it a reptile? So to do with flowchart, I always like to go with the flow and then just follow the direction. All right. So in this question, you are asked to identify what is question A and what is question B. All right. So let's start. So in the first question, they are asking you, do they have wings? Turtle don't have wings, right? So the answer is no. So if you look at question A and you go by elimination method, you would know that do they have wings? Turtle says no. Yes, that is a reasonable question. All right. Do their young look like adults? Okay, we know that baby turtles, they actually do look like the adults. So, and yet the answer here is no. So we know that that is actually wrong. So we can go ahead and cross out option 3 and option 4 and just focus on option 1 and 2. So then we continue to follow, okay, for question, yes. So assuming that the question A is do they have wings? Answer is yes. It goes on to question B. All right, so mosquitoes have wings, that's true. But the next question here is the answer is a no. So you have to pick a question whereby it's a no for the mosquito. So number 1, do their young look like adults? Answer no for mosquito. This is actually correct. Why is this so? Now remember, the young of a mosquito is like a larva, right? When it hatches from an egg, it's got no wings, it lives in water. It's totally different. So that's correct. But we would like to actually check to make sure that this one over here is also wrong. So do they give birth to the young alive? That is the question. And then you have this part here whereby the mosquito says no. That is correct because they lay eggs. However, when you take a look further down, the eagle actually lay eggs instead of giving birth to the young alive. So by saying yes, that's actually wrong. So this confirms our answer that this is wrong, leaving us with option 1 as the correct one. So now moving on to question 2. Now the diagram below shows the human digestive system. Now when it comes to human digestive system, right, you have to memorize, okay? You have to be able to identify structures, okay, related to the digestive system, and you need to be able to state their functions. Okay, so for example, if I'm talking about the mouth, all right, it contains teeth to chew and break the food into smaller pieces, hence increasing exposed surface area to digestive juice such as your saliva for faster digestion of food. All right, so that is one of the function. Of course, the other function of the mouth would be to secrete saliva, which is a type of digestive juice to break down the food. Now, very quickly, we can do a very straightforward revision on identification. So this is the mouth. All right, moving down, we have the stomach. And then you have your small intestines. And then you have your large intestines. Okay, just a very quick round through. I've talked about the mouth already, so I'm just going to jump right in to the stomach. So the stomach basically produces gastric juice, which is a type of digestive juice that helps to break down your food into smaller substances or simpler substances. Your small intestine has 2 primary functions. The first one is actually complete digestion of food substances, The second one is actually the absorption of these digested substances into your bloodstream. All right, so they have two functions for your small intestines. Now, do take note also that the complete digestion of food happens in your small intestines. When you go on to your large intestine, all right, no digestion actually happens. Instead, the function of your large intestine is really just to absorb excess water and mineral salts. Now, be very careful. The word excess needs to be here simply because, okay, we know that the body needs water, right? But too much water is no good, okay? Too little water is also no good. So if you have too much water in your feces, you end up with a diarrhea, right? So one of the other questions that they like to always ask would be like, oh, you know, this person's having a diarrhea, which part of the digestive system could be having an issue? And the answer will, of course, be your large intestines. So because the cells at your large intestines or your large intestines could be inflamed, or it could have infection over there, your cells are not working properly, it's not able to absorb the excess water, and that's why you end up with watery stools. All right? So let's go on to the question proper. Now, the graph below shows the amount of undigested food that is present in the digestive system as digestion is taking place. Which part of the digestive system, W, X, Y, or Z, corresponds to part D of the graph? So basically, if we look at part D here, we see that the amount of undigested food drops drastically here. In fact, it is the most. So remember I told you that digestion of food completes in the small intestines. So yes, this part over here actually corresponds to the small intestines, because this is the part that actually has the greatest amount of digestion taking place. In addition, if you take a look at this part over here, you realize that digestion has stopped. How would I know that? Because as you can see, the amount of undigested food stays the same. All right, which is actually which corresponds to what I have said earlier, whereby there is no digestion in your large intestines. Instead, okay, sorry, just give me a minute. Let me just put it back. Okay, instead, what happens over here is that it absorbs excess water and mineral salts. So therefore, my answer would be Y. Right, answer number 3. Moving on to question 3. 3 types of cells are shown below. So obviously, this topic is taken from Unit of Life. All right, in short, cells. Which cell parts are found in all 3 parts? Now, here's the thing, okay? In primary school level, okay, at primary school level, you just have to remember a typical animal cell. Anything that you can find in a typical animal cell, which looks like this one over here, can be found in all types of cells. Now, there are 3 components that you need to know that definitely can be found in your cell. Now, the first one over here, all right, is actually your cell membrane. Now, the function of your cell membrane is really to control substances entering and leaving your cell. All right, so you can think of it, an analogy would be like a fence, all right, that only allows certain things to go through. But when you're answering, please state that the function is to control substances entering and leaving, because your cell really doesn't just allow any random things to go in. Anything that goes in and out of your cell is very, very intentional. Now, the next one that we have here would be your nucleus. Now, the primary function of the nucleus, all right, is that it controls all activities in the cell. Now, when you're asked to state the function of your nucleus, it is not sufficient to just say that, oh, it controls all activities. Do give an example. So I would say the function of the nucleus is to control all activities in the cell. For example, reproduction, as well as cellular repair. Okay, so I like to put like double R so I can remind myself to give these 2 as an example of cellular activities that is controlled by your nucleus. On top of that, your nucleus actually contains something very important for reproduction to happen, and that is your DNA, all right, which can be passed down to the next generation. Last but not least, the third thing that you have is your cytoplasm. So your cytoplasm is really basically like a jelly-like substance that allows reactions to happen, activities of the cell to take place. All right, so these three things, okay, I'm going to change color to highlight 1, 2, and 3 can be found in all typical cells. Typical meaning common. All right, so I mean sometimes they might throw you a curveball and have like a red blood cell. So red blood cell is a specialized cell. It is not a typical cell. It doesn't have nucleus. But if you're comparing between normal cells, basically they should all contain these three. But if they say take reference to the diagram, so make sure you look at the diagram. All right. So for example, in cell A, we have these three components. In cell B, we would have the same three components as well. So for example, here we have the cell membrane, right? And then this would be your cytoplasm. And then this would be your nucleus, right? Similarly, for cell C, nucleus, cell membrane, and cytoplasm. So my answer in this case would be answer number 3, cell membrane and cytoplasm. So of course you should do elimination to make sure when you're checking. So for example, in the first one, I would say that it's wrong because cell A does not have cell wall, right? But all three has nucleus. Option number 2, once again, cell A does not have cell wall, so you can go ahead and eliminate these two straight away. 4, cell membrane and chloroplast. The other two cells, A and C, I do not see any chloroplast, but I do see a chloroplast in cell B, so this is wrong as well. So as you can see, when I check my answer or when I'm doing it, I eliminate the answers that are not by justifying it why. Now, MCQ questions, they are worth 2 marks each, so it is definitely worth your time to really think about it. Don't overthink, but make sure you do the necessary to make sure that, hey, you're not actually leaving any careless mistakes. Okay. Question 4. Sammy set up the following experiment. She filled a tubing with starch solution and dropped it into a beaker containing iodine solution. Okay. The iodine solution turns dark blue in the presence of starch. Now be very careful. Here I just like to point out one thing. It's iodine solution and not iodine. When doing booklet B questions related to starch test, students tend to just write, oh, iodine. Okay. It is not good enough. Alright, and you need to state the color change from what color to what color. Alright, so you need to say that iodine solution turns from yellow to dark blue in the presence of starch. So I will go ahead and just add it in the question statement from yellow to dark blue. Sometimes it could be yellowish brown. Sometimes it could be just yellow. And we're not really strict about this because different manufacturers, right? The iodine solution can come out sometimes a little bit more yellow or a little bit more brown depending on the batch that's being produced, the year, etc, etc. But they should all turn blue-black, okay? Now, they told you that after 20 minutes, she made the following observation, okay? It was mentioned that starch in the tubing, alright, is white, but at the end of the experiment, it turned dark blue. So whatever starch that is inside here, it had turned dark blue. So I'm just going to go ahead and color this for us to have a better understanding. Okay, whereas the iodine solution in the beaker remained as yellowish brown. No change, right? So based on the observation, which part of the cell does the tubing represent? I will go ahead and straight away, right at the top of my mind, I would know that it's actually cell membrane. Because remember earlier on, I actually revised with you what is the function of the cell membrane. It controls substances entering and leaving the cell. So in this case, if you remember correctly, the starch solution was actually white in color. Now, what happened was that it turned dark blue. So that means iodine solution must have entered from the beaker into the whisking tubing. Okay, this is a whisking tubing, or if you didn't know, okay? So it entered into the tubing, turning the starch over here blue-black. However, all right, this tubing has prevented the starch from exiting, because if the starch has exited into the beaker of water, then by right, my beaker of water should actually turn blue-black as well, which wasn't the case. That means this membrane over here of the tubing has actually prevented starch from leaving while allowing iodine particles to enter from the water, the solution outside. So this shows it being able to control the substances entering and leaving the cell. So hence my answer will be 4. Moving on to the next question. Okay. Brian conducted an experiment using 4 identical leaves, A, B, C, and D from the same plant. The leaves have tiny opening known as stomata on both their upper and lower surfaces. He coated some surfaces of the leaf with a thick layer of paint as shown, okay, in the table. Alright, the leaves were placed under a hot sun for 6 hours. At the end of the experiment, Brian noticed that the mass of each leaf had reduced. The graph below shows the mass of each leaf at the end of the experiment. So based on the results above, what could Brian conclude about the stomata on the leaves of the plant? So right off the top, I know that this question is talking about your stomata, all right? And I know that it's got something to do with photosynthesis as well, okay? Or it could also got to do with water being lost. Now, the first important thing we must remember when we're dealing with stomata is that it's got 2 functions, all right? Or rather 2 processes happening that is related for stomata. Now, the first one that is related to it is called transpiration. So some of you may ask me, Mr. Chong, I'm not very familiar with this term transpiration. That's fine. You don't have to specifically remember this, but this is the term for it. It is where water vapor is lost from the stomata. And if you cannot remember what are stomatas are actually the openings, tiny openings that you can find at the top and at the bottom of the leaves. Most of them are found at the bottom. All right, so that's something that it's key to understand, but not always the case. There are instances whereby more openings are found on the upper surface of a leaf, for example, for water plants. However, we will just leave it as such that most of them are found on the underside. Okay, and the next process that you need to remember that's related to your stomata would be photosynthesis. Some of you may be asking me, how does photosynthesis got to do with this stomata? Well, 2 things. One is water loss. Obviously, if let's just say your stomata open too big, you have too much water loss, all right, the plant is going to wilter and die. But more importantly, for photosynthesis, you're really concerned about the fact that you need carbon dioxide. All right, so I'm sure by now you know that carbon dioxide is a key, all right, factor that is needed in photosynthesis. So how does the carbon dioxide enter your enter your plant? Is actually through the tiny openings known as your stomata. So you really need this stomata to be unblocked in order for your carbon dioxide to enter, in order for photosynthesis to occur, right? So with that in mind, all right, let's take a look at what can he or she conclude. So basically, okay, you know that without carbon dioxide, all right, your plants are not able to photosynthesize. Okay, water loss could also be at the least. Okay, so you really need to take a look at it. Now, in this case, all right, what can he conclude? Now, based on whatever I have seen here, okay, when A has both upper and surface not coated with anything, okay, the mass of the leaf of the leaf is actually the least. Okay, so the keyword here is hot sun and mass. So in this case, I am guessing that because it's unblocked, water is being lost at a very rapid rate. So because of that, it causes the mass, okay, of your A to actually drop rapidly. Now, for B, now B in this case, if you take a look at it, lower is not blocked, but upper is blocked. So definitely there has been some loss of water, which resulted in it having some mass loss. Alright, but definitely not as much as A, because A has both upper and lower unblocked. So the fact that the upper surface has blocked has actually prevented some of the water from being lost, and hence it has a higher mass as compared to A for A and B. And then you look at C. For C, if you take a look at it, the lower surface was blocked, but not the upper. This actually has resulted in a greater loss of mass, which means that water has been lost more than B. So if you look at B and C and you compare these two, alright, you would see that even though there's only one surface that was blocked, okay, there were two different surfaces. For B, it was the upper. For C, it was the lower. Now, you will realize that, hey, even though one surface was being blocked, the amount of water loss is not the same. For C, the lower part was blocked, but yet it lost more water. How do I know it lost more water? It has a lower mass compared to B. That means more water must have been lost, right? Okay. So it tells me that there are more stomata. There could be more stomata on the underside. Okay. Okay, my apologies. Sorry, not more stomata on the underside, or rather more stomata, okay, on the upper side. Yes. Okay, there were more stomata on the upper side. Because, as you can see, for B, when the top surface was blocked, in this case, okay, the amount of water loss is actually less compared to C. Now for D, when both are blocked, as you can see, the mass of the leaf was the highest because least water could be lost from the leaf. So the leaf itself had the water mass. So looking at such, number 2 is the answer, whereby it stated that there were more stomata on the upper surface of the leaves. Okay? Question number 6. Nabil prepared the setup as shown below. So from the setup, straight away, it's a very classic setup. I straight away know that this got to do with photosynthesis because this is talking about a water plant and usually it's talking about the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, so you have the lamp here, okay, very classic to provide the light source. So I know it's on photosynthesis straight away. Okay, he noticed air bubbles forming and counted the number of air bubbles coming from water plants. The results are reflected in the graph below. At point F, Nabil made a change to the setup. He noticed a change in number of bubbles produced from point F, which of course did not lead to a change of results from point F. So once again, in order to understand this question, alright, I've always told you all to write down the word equation at the beginning of your paper so that you can have a reference point to know what are the factors needed for photosynthesis. So I'm going to write it once again. Alright, you know that for photosynthesis to occur, you need water, you need carbon dioxide, together with light and your chlorophyll, which would then give you your glucose, or your sugar together with oxygen. Alright, so the question then asks you, which of the following did not lead to the change in the results from point F? Okay. Now, if you were to look at this, the first thing you need to do is to really understand what happened at point F. So at point F, okay, number of bubbles being produced, okay, is increasing. It is still increasing, but it increases at a much faster rate because it takes a shorter time as compared to this part to actually go up, okay, to a greater number of bubbles produced per minute. So I know that it's increasing in rate. Now, take this and relate it to your word equation here. You know that in order for photosynthesis to occur, you need water, you need carbon dioxide, you need light, and you need chlorophyll. So definitely, you need to, something along these factors has to be increased in order to have an increasing rate of photosynthesis, whereby number of bubbles produced per minute increasing equals to increasing rate of photosynthesis in this case. Why? Because you know that oxygen is actually the bubbles that they're talking about. So if you see more bubbles, it means that more oxygen is being produced. And why more oxygen is being produced? Because rate of photosynthesis is going up. Okay, and that's how we can relate to that. So let's take a look. Now, 1. A few fishes were added to the basin. Okay. The question is did not. So we know that fishes, right, when they respire, they produce carbon dioxide. So with carbon dioxide, it will actually increase the rate instead of decreasing it. So this is out. More baking soda was placed into the basin. This is also out because more baking soda actually provides you with more carbon dioxide. Okay. 3. More water plants were added into the basin. Now, in this case, this will actually increase, okay, your, okay, so basically in this question, this will actually increase the rate of photosynthesis as well. Why? Because we're talking about your chlorophyll, right? With more water plants, you've got more chlorophyll, so it should increase. So therefore, your answer is wrong again. So that leaves us with the last one, but we must always check. So for the last one, the table land was moved further away from the basin. Okay, so yes, this indeed did not lead to the change in results, which is increasing rate of photosynthesis. Now, why is that case? Because when you move the land further away, you are actually decreasing light intensity. So when you decrease light intensity, you should actually have a decrease in rate of photosynthesis instead of increasing it. As you can see, light is needed for photosynthesis. So therefore, my answer is 4. Moving on to question 7. Jim prepared the 4 test tubes as shown below. Okay, so once again, probably it's got to do with respiration and photosynthesis. Why? Because I have living things here. That's respiration. And then I've got plants, water plants, and then a sun. So that's photosynthesis. So right off the top, I know it's related to these topics. Okay. So it tells me that substance X was added to the water into each setup. The table shows how substance X changed the color of water as it mixed with different amounts of carbon dioxide produced in the water after 3 hours. Okay. So then they present with you a table. Okay, if there is a decrease in CO2, it becomes yellow. If there's no change, it is green. If there's an increase, it is blue. Alright, so you need to make reference to this table. So what color of the water with substance X in each test tube at the end of... Okay, what is the color of water with substance X in each test tube at the end of the experiment? Okay. So when we look at here, okay, so we know that in this case, okay, what happens here? Now, over here, you need to understand that, okay, A here, all right, basically is, it should be an increase in carbon dioxide. correct? Why? Because in this case, it is in a cardboard box. When there is a cardboard box, we know that the plants are unable to photosynthesize because light is unable to enter from the sun. So because of that, your green plants are just carrying out respiration. So on this note, I want to stress to all students, please remember this. Respiration happens 24/7 all the time for plants. It's just that, when it's able to photosynthesize, it produces more oxygen than what it consumes for respiration. So hence there's an excess surplus of oxygen and it gives out. Okay, so it doesn't mean that once you photosynthesize, it doesn't produce oxygen. Once you photosynthesize, it doesn't carry out respiration. Okay, respiration happens all the time because it is a living thing. Okay, so in this case, your A needs to be blue in color because, there should be an increase in carbon dioxide because your plant is respiring. Okay, your snail here is also respiring. So in fact, for both A and B, I would say that it should be blue, right? Because when your snail respires, it also produces carbon dioxide. Now, then after that, for your C and your D, let's take a look at that. Now, for your C, very clearly, there should actually be an increase in carbon dioxide as well because your snail is actually respiring. So when it respires, it will produce carbon dioxide. So it should be blue as well. Now, for D, here's the interesting part. You have the plant that is able to photosynthesize now because now light can reach your plant. It will take in the carbon dioxide that's being produced by your snail. Okay? So in this case, I would say that a plausible answer here would actually be yellow. Okay? Or it could also be green. Now, this is the part that you need to use elimination method because this is something that we're not sure of. Why is this a variable? Because it really depends on the rate of respiration of your snail. Okay, did it produce enough carbon dioxide? Okay, it also depends on the photosynthesis rate of the plant, and which the question didn't really state state exactly. But I do know that my plant will remove some of the carbon dioxide. So whether it removes more than what the snail is being producing, or it actually removes less, I don't know. But I know that it's either a decrease or a no change for carbon dioxide. That is for sure. So over here, I'm certain that A must be blue, B must be blue, and C must be blue. So then I go on to look at my options. Straight off, I know that option 1 is wrong because I have blue, yellow, green. I need all 3 to be blue. So I will cancel that out. And then when I look at option 3, once again, I need all 3 to be blue. So this is wrong. Same with the last option. So the only one that gives me all 3 blue would be option 2. And then remember, I told you it could be yellow or green in this case. So the answer is yellow. Okay, it fits the bill. So the best possible answer is actually 2 in this case. Okay, moving on to question 8. Now the diagram below shows the movement of substances in the plant transport system. Okay, what do plant parts A, B, and C represent? Right? Okay, now the first things first, okay, we have to recognize identify what are the various parts. So there are certain parts that we can actually start off with. So for example, for water, I would want to actually look for my roots, try to identify my roots first, because that is where water would definitely come from. So I know that water is a dotted line, correct? Water is a sort of like a dotted line, movement of water. So I want to see where does water originate from. And remember this, water is always unidirectional, meaning that it always goes from the roots to the leaves, never the other way around. So if I were to trace back, okay, so this is the end, right? So this is the arrowhead, and I trace back water, the dotted line, I would end up with A. So I know A is where my water originated from. This has to be my roots. So right off the top, I didn't know A is my roots. Okay, I can then safely eliminate anything that which states that they are not roots. So option 2 and 4, they're out. The next part I want to identify would be my leaves, because for transport of food, the point of origin would come from my leaves, because leaves are the organs of the plants that actually makes food. So that's why that's the point of origin. So I know that for food is actually solid line, right? So and it ends over at A. So I'm going to trace backwards. So I know that the point of origin is B, and I know that this has to be my leaf, right? So anything that is not my leaf, I can eliminate already. Okay, so option 3 says that B is flower, so this is wrong. I go ahead and eliminate it. Whereas option 1 says that B is the leaf, correct. Now the last one that I'll look at is my stem. So remember, my stem transport both food and water. So I will look at C and see if that is really indeed the case. So if you look at C, I will see that, hey, my water passes through C and my food also passes through C. So that means that this has to be my stem. And yes, indeed, is my option 1, okay, states that C is the stem. So that's how I figure out my answer very clearly and very confidently. Moving on to question 9. 4 people were trapped in an enclosed lift of half an hour as shown in the diagram. There was no fresh air. So things like air would have told me that, okay, this is a question probably on respiration. Now, which of the following shows the changes in the composition of gases in the leaf after half an hour being trapped in the leaf? So for this, it's got to do with the question on respiration. So I always tell students, write the word equation for respiration at the front of your paper for easy reference, okay, so that you don't get panicky during halfway of the exam, okay? Now, so the word equation would be, first you have glucose, or your simple sugar or digested food, okay? And then you need a very important gas called your oxygen, and you would get carbon dioxide as your waste gas, together with energy, which is what you need to carry out life processes, and water. Now, so based on just this alone, I know that if I'm in a trapped enclosure, oxygen will be used up. Instead, I'll be giving up lots of carbon dioxide. So oxygen would tend to increase. Oxygen will tend to decrease because I'm using it, I'm depleting it. Carbon dioxide will start to increase, right? Now, the next thing I also need to know to answer this question would be the composition of the atmospheric air. So just in case you don't know, okay, in atmospheric air, normal atmospheric air, okay, oxygen, okay, go ahead and pen this down, is about 21%, thereabout. May differ, okay, because different parts of the world, obviously, you know, it also depends on the altitudes that you're at. So if you're climbing, say, Mount Everest, you know, it could be lesser, all right? And then after that, you've got carbon dioxide, which is about 0.03%. And then you have your nitrogen, which is about 78%. Now, the remaining part of the other gases, right, which is in total together carbon dioxide is about 1%, are your other gases such as argon, neon, helium, okay, and hydrogen. So these, we don't really talk about it. Now, the key thing is your body does not use nitrogen at all for anything. So it should remain the same, whether when you're inhaling or exhaling, no diff. However, the only thing that will probably change will be your carbon dioxide and your oxygen. Now, there is one more gas that varies, and that is your water vapor. So water vapor tends to increase, okay, because there are moisture in your lungs, okay, lining your air sacs, okay. So when you breathe out, okay, there's actually, it becomes moist. All right, so there are times whereby you can actually prove that, you know, when you are when you're breathing on a cold glass, you see water droplets on it. That is because the breath that you are breathing out is that is saturated with water vapor. All right, and this proves that water vapor will increase in exhaled air compared to inhaled air. So therefore, I'm looking for the first part over here, my carbon dioxide should actually increase, right? Like I told you, because it is a product of respiration. So by that, anything that says decreases, I can go right ahead to cancel that out. So I'll eliminate option 2 and 3. My oxygen needs to decrease because I'm using it up, all right, based on what I see in my word equation. So anything that says increases, I can go ahead and cancel it out as well. Okay, my water vapor should increase like what I told you. All right, so for option 1 and 4 are looking exactly the same. And my nitrogen, I'm looking for something that remains the same. So therefore, that tells me that it's option 4. All right, moving on to question 10. Okay, 4 blood samples, W, X, Y, and Z were taken from different parts of the human body. Okay, based on the graph above, which of the blood samples was most likely taken from blood flowing from the lungs to the heart? Okay, now, in this case, all right, now, you need to understand something, okay? Blood that has just exited from the lungs. So remember, in the lungs, gaseous exchange happen, right? So what are you exchanging for, okay? Now, you want to basically decrease your carbon dioxide, so you exhale that out, and you want to increase in your oxygen. So blood that just left the lungs will be extremely high in oxygen and extremely low in carbon dioxide, right? So when it's from the lungs, it goes back to the heart. It should be very high in your oxygen. So I'm looking for something of the highest, but however, it should not be 100%. So if I look at this graph, my most plausible ones would be X and Z. All right, but Z cannot be 100%. Why it cannot be 100%? Because in your blood, no matter what, and no matter how efficient your gaseous exchange can be, okay, there is just no way that there is enough time in your lungs, the blood spends enough time to fully remove all your carbon dioxide and then fully replace that with oxygen. So the one that is most plausible and most logical is actually, I would say that it is actually X in this case. All right, so my answer would be number 2. Moving on to question 11, the diagram below shows life cycles of animals A and B. Okay, based on the diagram above, which of the following statements is correct? So when you're given life cycles, right, you really need to just compare vis-a-vis. That's about it. So firstly, the young of both adults resembles the adults. Right off the top, you know that's not true. Okay, you look at your mosquito. In no way does your adult mosquito looks like it. So straight away, let's cross that out. 2, both their life cycles have eggs laid in water. Okay, let's take a look at it. Is it true in this case? Well, yes, right? So go ahead and give yourself this tick. Oh, so because they're looking for incorrect, right? So this could most probably be the answer. I'm going to just circle this and just make sure that the rest are wrong. Both animals have parts of their life cycles in water. This is correct as well. Both adult stages have different breathing parts, okay, for their young. Yeah, that's true. So therefore, based on this answer, okay, it would be 1. A plant produce the same type of flower as shown below. Produce the type of flower as shown below. William wanted to find out if a fruit can still be produced when a certain part of flower is removed. Below are the diagrams that show what he did to flowers X, Y, and Z. William then dusted pollen grains for the same type of flowers over X, Y, and Z and observed the flowers for 2 weeks. Which of the flowers will most likely develop into a fruit? So very importantly, for this kind of question, right, it's a very typical question. Now, more often than not, right, sadly, it is just the female part that is actually needed. You realize that, right? Because he dusted the pollen grains. So as long as the plants, or rather the flower, has the female part of the flower intact, it can become a fruit, technically speaking, with no issues. Alright, so in this case, I'm really looking for flowers that have the female part intact, and that's about it. So if you take a look at it, okay, X, alright, in this case, parts A were removed, okay, so A is actually the anther. Now you really do not need the anther. The anther is where the pollen grains are, right? So remember, William's going to dust it, so it doesn't matter. So part X will still be able to have a fruit because B, which is the stigma, is still there, which is the female part. Now flower B, part B was removed, so we know that the female part has been removed. So the stigma is removed. It's not possible. And Z, part C, were removed. Now C is actually the petals. It doesn't affect anything when it comes to formation of fruits. So therefore, the answer will be X and Z, option 3. Next, the diagram below shows the female and male reproductive system in humans. Which two parts of the female and male reproductive system have similar function? Okay, my answer would be very straightforward. Okay, R and Y. Now, R is the ovary. Okay, just in case you don't know, I'm going to pen it down. And Y is the testis. Now, the primary function of these two parts is to produce the sex cells. Alright, so for the ovary will be the egg, and for the testis will be your sperms. Okay, I'm just going to pen it down for you really quick. Okay, so your answer would be R and Y, answer number 4. Next, Jack saw 2 different types of birds. Okay, Y and Z at the bird park. Bird Y was seen feeding in the pond, while Z was seen feeding on the on the tree trunk. Bird Y waded through shallow waters and did not swim. Bird Z perched on the tree trunk and fed on tiny organisms. Okay, which feet of A, B, C, D shown below represents the feet of bird Y and Z? So as you can see, I think bird Y is pretty straightforward, right? Can you see it's very long and thin? Okay, so by saying that, straight away I know that A belongs to Y. So anything that is not A for bird Y is wrong, so I will go ahead and cross out option 3 and 4. Now look at Z. Z is the one that is a little bit tricky over here. Now I know it's not long and thin, so A is not bird Z. Okay, for sure. I also know that it definitely is not the one with the webbings, because it doesn't swim. Alright, so I can go ahead and cross out A and D for bird Z. Now then it boils down to B and C. Now if you take a look at C, it's rather curved. So this tells me that this bird, alright, feeds on larger mammals. So it probably belonged to a predatory kind of birds, like perhaps like how should I put it? Maybe like an eagle or something, you know, that would grab onto maybe to like a fish or like a mouse, a small creature kind of thing, because it got those claws to really cling onto it. So I'm gonna go with answer B in this case. So answer 1. 15. Okay, study the food chain below. over here. So once again, just a very quick recap. The arrows over here actually talks about the feeding relationship. Okay, so what actually happens is that it states that plant is eaten by grasshopper. This arrow also talks about energy transfer. So energy is transferred from your plant to your grasshopper to your spider, and then your spider to your sparrow. Okay, now the plant is called a producer because it's able to so-called produce food from light it can carry out photosynthesis. This is something that can only be done by plants. Whereas your grasshopper, spider, and your sparrows, they are all consumers because they can only consume other living things in order to get their energy. So the question states, now, there is a sudden increase in the population of sparrow. Which one of the following likely shows the changes in the population of plant, grasshopper, and spider? So remember, it's a feeding relationship. A food chain shows that, right? So obviously, a change in any one of this group of organisms will affect others, be it positively or negatively. So if there is an increase in your sparrow, the important thing is to note that your sparrow feeds on your spider. So what happens is that your spider, okay, should decrease, right? When you think about it. Okay, so when you take a look at it, okay, when your spider decreases, there are less spiders to feed on your grasshopper, and so your grasshopper should actually increase. Now, when there is an increase in your grasshopper, your poor plants are being eaten up at a faster rate. So it should decrease. So we are looking for a graph that actually shows us this pattern that we have just deciphered out. So looking at the first one, okay, so my sparrow is supposed, after it increases, my spider is supposed to decrease, right? So okay, this one shows spider decreasing, yes, check. And then my grasshopper is supposed to increase. Did it increase? Yes, check. And my plant is supposed to decrease. Did it decrease? Yes, check. So therefore, my answer is 1. Alright, and that's how you attempt this question. 16. Okay, now, this is one of the most common questions. Okay, we really have to understand, okay, what happens in boiling and the changes of state and how they are related. So usually how I like to do this is I usually write it somewhere very quickly. I know that when you heat something up, right, it first is from a solid. When you hit it to its melting point, when it reaches melting point, then it will become a liquid. And only when it reaches boiling point, then it become a gas. Okay, so it goes this way. So with this very quick diagram, or this just quick a note at the side, it can help you along the way. Let me explain to you why. Okay, so let's start. Which of the following statements are correct? So substance N has the lowest boiling point, right? It has the lowest boiling point. So for it to boil, okay, for it to okay, so after boiling, all right, you will get a gas. So let's take a look at it. Okay, now N is over here. It states that even at 75 degrees, it is still a solid. So that means it has not even become a liquid. How can it become a gas? So therefore, its boiling point is one of the highest, because even at 75 degrees, it is still a solid. So that means its boiling point has to be above 75. And yet the highest that they have here is 75 already. So it's above 75. So in fact, I might even argue that substance N has the highest boiling point. So this is wrong. Okay, not true. So anything with A, straight away cross it out. Now, B, substance K has the highest melting point. Okay. Now, in this case, highest melting point means that it reaches a certain point, then it will melt. So once again, if you take a look at this diagram here, okay, K actually became a liquid at 25 degrees already. So that means the melting point is actually below 25 degrees, because at 25 degrees is already liquid. So that means the melting point must be lower. So how can it have the highest melting point? So this is actually wrong as well. C. Okay. The boiling point of substance L is between 50 and 75. So we look at L. Now I know that at 25 degrees, okay, so we're looking at boiling, right? So we're looking at between gas and liquid. So at 50 degree, it was liquid. At 75 degrees, it was actually gas already. So that means the boiling point, okay, so remember our note over here, in order for it to be a gas, okay, it needs to reach boiling point. So I know that the boiling point must be higher than 50, but lower than 75. So yes, in fact, it is between. This is correct. Okay, and the last point, the melting point of substance M is between 25 and 50 degree. So if you take a look at M, okay, it is actually a liquid at 50 degrees, but it's still a solid at 25. So this tells me that for it, the melting point must be higher than 25 degrees, but yet lower than 50 degrees. Okay? So therefore, yes, it is actually between. So therefore, answer C and D, number 4. Okay, question number 17. The electric circuit below is made of identical wires, bulbs, and batteries, which are all in good working condition. Which of the following correctly describes the bulbs when switches 1 and 2 are closed? Now, to do this, right, I will actually take a pen or pencil, okay, pencil, let me rephrase that, and I will close it up. Switch 1, okay, they are closed, okay? And then I would trace to actually see where does this is this a closed circuit or is this an open circuit, so I know which bulb will actually light up and what kind of circuit it is. So remember, electric current always run from the positive end, which is longer end. Okay, so this is indeed a closed circuit, and on top of that, I also know that this J, K, and L, these 3 bulbs here, are arranged in a series arrangement because it goes one after another. Okay, so based on this, I know that all 3 of them have the same brightness. Alright, so looking through the options, straight away I already can identify bulbs J, K, L have the same brightness. Alright. Next. Okay, so this is a question that it's a P4 topic. Now this question basically is telling you there are 2 street lamps X and Y, okay, are placed at different positions along the straight path. Belinda noticed 2 shadows of herself as she walks from A to E. Alright, and then they show you a graph to tell you how the height of a shadow changes. Now, this question, right, it's got to do with light and shadows. It is actually talking about, it's similar to the question, to the scenario whereby if you remembered how the position of a sun can tell what time is it, all right, length of shadow. So I'm just going to do a very quick revision so that we can actually make sense of what's happening. So if you remember, when the sun is directly above an object, say a stick, the shadow is the shortest, right? Okay, and when the sun is at the lowest, okay, the shadow is the longest, correct? So this is actually, in a way you can say that the lamp, okay, is the sun, and when Belinda walks, all right, she's actually changing the position of the sun, all right, relative to her position. So if you take a look at it, okay, as she when she's near the lamppost, it should be her shadow should be the shortest, okay, because the lamppost is directly near her. So if she's here, okay, if she's here and the lamppost is here, her shadow should be the shortest. And then at the same time, if she's walking further away, what happens now is that the lamppost position changes, all right, to as if the sun is very low. So as she walks further away from the lamppost, okay, her shadow should actually increase. So let's take a look at our options here. Now I'm just going to, for time sake, I'm just going to jump straight to the correct answer and explain. So if you take a look at option 2, which is the correct answer, okay, so as you can see, I'm going to explain for X first. Now, so for X is actually the dotted line. As you can see, all right, she walks from A to E. So her direction of walking is actually from here to here. All right, so from A to B. From A, she walks to E. So she starts off nearest to X. So remember I told you at the point that you are nearest to the lamppost, which is where she is over here, the light is directly above here, okay, as you can see in the examples of the sun. So her shadow should be the shortest, okay, which is indeed the case. Now, as she walks this way, all right, she walks this way, her shadow should increase in length, which is actually what is happening. Because now, all right, the position of her has changed. She is now here. Instead of being overhead, okay, position of X is now here. It has shifted. So therefore, okay, it's like the sun moving in this direction, right? If this is her over here, this is the sun, okay, the shadow is increasing in length. Maybe I should use a different color, okay, as opposed to initially it was here. All right, it increases in length. So that is exactly what is being shown here. So yes, check, X is correct. Now let's talk about Y. Now from Y, you need to understand that at first, she was standing at A and Y is at here. So it's as if the sun was actually somewhere, I'm going to use a different color, maybe orange, here. Right? So her shadow will be slightly longer. Okay? So she's standing here and the sun's position is here. Therefore, her shadow should be slightly longer. But then she walks in this direction, whereby she's getting closer towards the sun. So therefore, her shadow should get shorter and shorter and shorter, right? Which is what is shown over here because it's decreasing. However, at D, do you realize that D is just right below Y? So this is the point where she's directly below the sun, or rather the lamp in this case. Her shadow needs to be the shortest, which is what is depicted over here. Shortest, it decreases, become the shortest. Now, then she proceeds to walk past Y, okay, and then she goes to E over here. That's where her shadow will start to increase again because she's walking away from the sun, right? Being directly at the sun. The sun's position has shifted again to the side. Okay, so this shows this happening, okay? So, therefore, answer is 2. Now, do take the time to justify for yourself why the rest of the options are wrong, okay? Alright, moving on to 19. Andy set up the following experiment. Okay. When the copper strips in the circuit were lowered into the container containing liquid X, he observed that the nichrome wire became red hot after a few minutes. What conclusion can Andy draw about the properties of the container and, alright, the liquid from the above experiment? So in order for the wires to become hot, right, there must be a complete circuit, right? So positive to negative. So if you take a look at it, Okay, right over here, we know that for sure the liquid itself must be a conductor of electricity. There is no other way about it. Okay, because somehow electricity must flow from here to here. Now your container, on the other hand, it doesn't matter. Okay, it could be a conductor of electricity, it may not be. Okay, it can be made of rubber, something is a non-conductor of electricity. It doesn't matter, because as long as my liquid is, because these strips are not touching the container, so it's not possible to tell in this case. So therefore, container is not possible to tell whether is it a conductor of electricity. Okay, so we can go ahead and cross out this, and this. Okay, in fact, only leaving option 2. And X, like I told you, it has to be a conductor of electricity. So option number 2, this is pretty straightforward. 20. Okay, Ali shot a piece of rock into the air using a slingshot. The dotted line shows the path taken from by the rock by the point it was released from point Y. Based on what Ali learned during science class, he then drew energy graph. Okay, which of the following correctly represents energy graphs A, B, C of the rock / rubber band from the point he put the thick rubber band to point Y. Okay, now over here, okay, let's take a look at A first. So A increases and then decreases. So when you look at this, right, when you talk about this rock, as it increases, what type of energy would corresponds to this kind of curve? Well, I would say that it has to be your gravitational potential energy. Okay, why? Okay, why would I say that? Now, that's because, as you can see, when the rock flies from this point to this point, it is increasing in GPE because of height. You see the height is going up. However, when it reaches a certain point, it starts to go down. So this is very straightforward GPE. And then for B over here, all right, I am looking at your elastic potential energy. Why? Okay, because as you can see, at first, your elastic potential energy only occurs at your thick rubber band. So the minute you releases it, it will start to convert to other form of energy. Okay, and then it will decreases. That's for sure. Correct? Elastic potential energy. And then last but not least, you have your kinetic energy, in this case, all right, which is energy C. Why? So if you take a look at it, okay, it first decreases and then it increases. Okay, so why is that so? Now, if you take a look at here, over here, this corresponds to this part of the graph. So as you release your slingshot, your kinetic energy is being converted to other forms of energy, such as your GPE. So obviously, as GPE increases, your KE will decrease because it's being converted to another form. And then after that, at the highest point, it starts to increase again because your GPE will then start to decrease because it gets converted to your KE. So that's why your KE increases. So this actually aligns itself very nicely to C, kinetic energy, KE. So based on this ID, identify ID. C is KE, A is GPE, B is elastic potential energy, option 3. Okay, moving on to question 21. Okay, Chris changed the battery of his remote control car. When the battery was fully charged, he removed it from the charger. Which of the following best represents the energy transfer that took place when the car was actually moving? Okay, now remember, with things to do with battery, right, it's always chemical potential energy. That's it, straightforward. So the first thing that I would want to see is chemical potential energy. No doubt about it. So even with that in mind, I can see that option 1, 2, 3 are all wrong. okay, because the first energy wasn't potential energy. So right off the top, I already know that my answer is number 4. But let's continue to see if it makes sense. So from chemical potential energy, it will be converted electrical energy, which is then needed to run your car. And so when your car is moving, it's kinetic energy. And when it's moving, it generates heat energy together with light energy. Okay, because your car probably has some lights, okay, some flashing lights, okay, colorful lights, okay, to make it attractive. Next. 22. A container is filled with some small marbles. It is sealed with an airtight cover with a plunger as shown. So this, right off the top, I can think of would be matter. Okay, talking about, air can compress and the other two states are not possible. Okay. Now, if some air were removed from the container, what will happen to the mass and volume of air in the container? Okay. Now, this is a classic tricky question. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people know that air can be compressed. But do you know that the air particles can also spread itself out to occupy a fixed amount of space? So that is why it is very important to note that the statement that we always say is, in a gaseous state, okay, gas has no fixed volume. Yes, we always say that it can be compressed, gases can be compressed, but we also state that it has no fixed volume, meaning that the amount of space it occupies is not fixed. It can go both ways. You can compress air, you can also so-called expand the air, all right, to occupy space. But I wouldn't so much to use expand in this case because that's not the usual convention, but just to give you an idea of it. So the air particles will spread itself out to occupy whatever space it is given. So in this case, when you remove the container, you would actually have the same mass of air. Now, remember, mass is dealing with the amount of substance that is used to make a particular object. All right, the amount of substance or matter, or rather the amount of matter used to make substance. Okay, so that doesn't, in this case, it changes because you have removed some air, right? So to make a very simple analogy, let's just say there were 5 particles of air in this particular box. Now, if you remove some air, let's say you remove 2 of them, what would happen is that, okay, the volume of the air doesn't change because remember, it spreads itself out to occupy the space, all right, that is given. So I'm assuming that this 2 box A and B is the exact same size, exact same container, just that you removed 2 particles of air. So it spread itself out. So in this case, all right, you have removed 2 particles of air. So has the mass changed? Yes. It has reduced from 5 particles to 3 particles. However, the volume didn't change because you're still occupying the same amount of space, whether is it A or B scenario. Okay, so in this case, your mass of air has indeed decreased, okay, but your volume of air remains the same. Answer 2. All right, moving on. Okay, right off the top, before I even look at it, this already reminds me of a question that is on water cycle. Just saying. Jadine set up an experiment as shown below. She placed an empty cup in a container of warm water. Then she placed a dish containing ice cubes on the beaker. She decided to make a change in the setup and repeated experiment for the same duration. Which of the following results would be true? Okay, now let's take a look at each one. If she changes the water, which used to be at 50 degrees to 90 degrees, less water is collected in the cup. This is not correct. Why? Because a higher temperature will increase rate of evaporation, which would then increase rate of which you have more water vapor in the surrounding. Therefore, rate of condensation will be faster, and therefore you should collect more water. So this is wrong. Next, water at 30 degrees used in the beaker, less water is collected in the cup. Yes, this is possible. Why? Because this is actually the opposite of the 90 degrees one, because by using something that is less warm, rate of evaporation is slower, you get less water vapor in the surrounding and therefore less condensation. Okay, however, remember we always need to look through the options to make sure and justify that the rest are really not true. A wider cup placed in the beaker, okay, more water will be collected. Well, not true, simply because, can you see this is curved? It will still drip to the center. Okay, so nope, doesn't matter. Ice cubes were removed from the dish. This is definitely wrong, because you really would want the temperature difference between your cooler surface and your water vapor to be of the greatest difference. So you want to cool this as much as possible by adding more ice cube, in fact, and you want to make your water vapor hotter. Alright, so this is also wrong. So yes, our answer 2 is correct. Question 24. The table below shows the melting and boiling points of 3 substances. Alright, at 30 degrees, which of the following substances have to be stored in a sealed container to prevent the substance from escaping into the environment? Now, this is a very similar question to what we've done earlier. It's really knowing about what happens, okay, at boiling and melting points. Okay, now, in this case, you basically you are looking for something that is actually a gas. Okay, so the boiling point must be below 30 degrees Celsius. So if you take Y, because if let's just say the boiling point is below 30 degrees Celsius, at 30 degrees Celsius, the substance would already have been a gaseous state, right? So because when it is a gaseous state, it can escape into the environment. So the only 2 substances with a boiling point that is lower than 30 degrees, in this case would be your substance A and B. So hence, very straight down, hands down, option 3. Okay, question 25. Okay. Lydia conducted an experiment to find out the magnetic property of 4 materials, W, X, Y, and Z. She constructed 3 different setups. Each setup consists of a plastic cup, a bowl, a cover for each cup made out of one of each of this material. So this is the top part. Okay. Now, she held a very strong magnet close to each of the setup and made the following observations. Based on the observations, which of the following describes the magnetic properties of W, X, Y, and Z? Okay, so right at the top, I'm going to just jump into the correct answer and then explain to you why is the case, why is it the case. Okay, so the correct answer in this case will be number 2. Now, why is this so? Now, magnetic material will definitely be Y, okay, because if you take a look at Y, okay, it got attracted. It got attracted, okay, when this happened, okay, in this scenario in setup B. So we know for sure that this Y here could be made up of a magnetic object, okay, or rather a magnetic material, because it got attracted. Okay, now for W and X is their non-magnetic material. Now, why is that the case? Firstly, if you take a look at this setup over here, okay, it is shown that in this case, W did not get attracted to the bar magnet at all. And here's the thing. If you compare setup A and setup B, they are exactly the same. So if Y got attracted, okay, that means W should be able to be attracted to the bar magnet if it was made up of a magnetic material, which isn't the case, right? Okay. Next, we know that X is not a magnetic material because the bar magnet didn't get attracted to material X, if you realize. She said a very strong magnet. So if X was indeed a magnetic material, it would have been attracted to the bar magnet, which didn't happen. Now, last but not least, it is impossible to tell for in Z in this case. Okay, now why is it so? For Z, it's not possible to tell because, all right, you have this Y material here, okay, which is actually a magnetic material. So because of that, you are not able to tell. So therefore, answer is 2. Moving on to question 26. A ball is dropped into the pipe from one end. When air is blown in continuously from the other end of the pipe, the ball stays floating in the pipe as shown in the diagram. Which one of the following best explain why the ball stays afloat? Okay, let's take a look at our options. Okay, now, the air reduces gravitational force acting on the ball. No, it does not. Okay, gravitational force is acting on it is consistent. It's the same throughout. Alright, it didn't reduce. So this is wrong. 2, there is no gravitational force acting on the ball of the pipe. That is wrong also. Okay, if there's no gravitational force acting, it should be floating on its own. No air is needed. Okay. 3, the force of the air exerted of the ball is equal to the gravitational force acting on the ball. This is correct. Okay, that's why it is floating at this point. 4, the frictional force between the ball and the pipe opposes the motion of the ball and prevents it from moving down. There is no contact. So remember, frictional force is a contact force. So it needs 2 surfaces in contact in order to have it. So in this case, no, not happening. So therefore, your option is 3. Number 27. Berlin conducted an experiment with 2 toy cars similar size but different masses, 80 and 120. An elastic spring measuring 12 cm is fixed to the wall. She uses the elastic spring force to push each car forward on the floor by releasing and compressing on the spring as shown. Conducted 4 different tests based on the conditions shown in the table below. So the condition would be that the length of compressed spring has changed together with the mass of the car being changed. Now, which test would result in the car moving the greatest distance? Okay. So, having looked at it, you would actually find that you would need to have one that actually got compressed the most, because with something that is compressed the most, you get the most amount of elastic potential force. Okay, so therefore 5 is the smallest here. So either A or B. Now on top of that, something of a lighter mass will also travel further because there is less gravity acting on it. So therefore AT. So therefore A will be your best possible answer. 28. Matt used the following setup to determine the flexibility of identical rods made of different materials. Now, which of the following set of variables will allow him to find the flexibility of identical rods made of different materials? Okay, now, so all in all, remember this. Okay, now, when you are conducting an experiment, you basically only have one variable. Okay, there can be one change variable. And in this case, he has made it very clear he wants to use different materials. So definitely right off the top, the rod, okay, needs to be changed. Other than that, everything else needs to be the same. Alright? And what's happening here is that you would want to look at the angle to see how much of it is being changed. So right off the top, from the very first one, the change variable, I can go ahead and cross out 2 already. 1 is wrong because it talks about mass or weight. 3 is also wrong because it talks about thickness of rod. So go ahead, I will cancel these 2 out. Okay? Now, let's take a look at measured variable. So it's either, okay, option 4 says angle A. So the more flexible something is, all right, the greater the angle would be, right? So I can measure angle A, but I could also measure x, distance xy, because the more flexible it is, the lower I go, the greater the distance x, if you can see, right? So this 2, well, possible. So I would take this 2. Now, the variable to be kept the same. Here's the thing. I cannot keep my angle A the same because this is something that depends on the experiment. It's a result, it's an outcome of the experiment. So it's not something that I can control. So therefore, by saying that, okay, variable to kept the same is A is actually wrong because I don't control this. So straight off the back, straight off the top, 2 is wrong. And then the last one, just to be sure, mass of weight. Yes, I should keep my mass of the weight the same. So therefore, option 4. Alright, I've come to the end of this paper, booklet A. I hope you understood the concept that I've been talking about. If not, please seek further clarification from your teachers, or you can always approach me for clarification. Alright, thank you very much and have a wonderful day.